It is 1 minute past 2. From the looks of it, we are missing 2 of our presenters, and I don't know if I see you in the room, but Dex and Madi, if you can hear this, please come to your seats. Okay. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone, to the second annual 3MT event. This is a university-wide competition, and we're very excited to have everyone here. I see some familiar faces. My name is Autumn Anthony. I am the Assistant Director in the Office of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs. And joining me is Hillary Hughes as our Program Associate in the Office of Postdoctoral Affairs. We will be your hosts this afternoon. We're excited to be here and excited to get started. But first, I would like to take a moment to introduce our judges. So joining us as our 3MT alumni judge is Udunopa Abalu.
They're in the back of the room. Hello.
Thank you. We see you. We also have Dr. Prachi Mahableshwarkar. Thank you. And notably, Prachi won the second place and People's Choice Award last year, so we're very proud of that. We have Dr. Zhenyu Li, Associate Professor of Biomedical Engineering. Thank you. We also have Dr. Daniel Schwartz, Professor of History. Thank you. We have Dr. Heather Young, Professor and Vice Chair of Epidemiology, Environmental and Occupational Health in the Milken Institute School of Public Health. Do we have?
She waved.
Okay, there we go. And I think that is all of our judges. Oh, we have one more?
Nope, that's all.
Okay, so now we would like to invite Dr. Suresh Subramaniam, our Vice Provost of Graduate and Postdoctoral Affairs.
Thank you, Autumn. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you all for joining us for the second GW-wide 3MT competition. A little bit of history about 3MT. The 3MT was first developed by the University of Queensland in Australia in 2008 to cultivate students' academic, presentation, and research communication skills. The competition supports their capacity to effectively explain their research in 3 minutes. Hence the name, in a language appropriate to a non-specialist audience. Since its inception, the 3MT has grown exponentially and is now held in over 85 countries and almost 1,000 universities around the world. At GW, the competition began in 2019 at the Columbian College of Arts and Sciences and was expanded to doctoral students from all GW schools last year. Today's competition features over 20 speakers from 5 of GW schools. They will be competing for multiple cash prizes, including a People's Choice Award that is given to the best speaker that is chosen by you all, the audience. The first place winner in today's competition will represent GW in the 2025 Northeastern Association of Graduate Schools, or NAGS, regional competition in April, and possibly in the national competition later this year. I'll note here that the winner of last year's GW competition, Leah Kaplan of the School of Engineering and Applied Science, won the People's Choice Award at the NAGS competition last year, which was held in Canada. So students, first, congratulations on being invited to present today. The bar for you has been set high already. Not to put pressure on you, but I'm confident that you will do just as well, if not better, today. My best wishes to all of you. I'm going to invite Hillary Hughes to the podium now. Hillary will go over the competition rules and other logistics before we move to the presentations.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Thank you, Suresh. Now for the rules of the competition. Some of these are for our competitors and some are for our attendees. I do ask that everyone please silence their cell phones and refrain from any flash photography. We do have professional photographers here, so they are exempt from that rule, so please don't get upset if you do see some flashes. If you do decide to take any pictures, please do tag us on social media. There is a hashtag on the back of our program. Now, students will present in 3 sets of 8, and we do ask that you hold your applause until the end of each set of 8. We have only a short while to transition between each set of students, and while we would love to applaud them all individually, we would be here forever. Any last questions from my participants before we begin? No? Then let's begin. Our first presenter is Mandy Bagbunzadeh. Please come on up.
Imagine you're standing in a dim lit room, staring at a book written in a language that no one understands. Now, imagine that book conceals the secrets of life itself. That's DNA. DNA is the blueprint of all living things, from the bacteria living in your gut to the cells of your body. And every living organism has a unique DNA signature. Me, you, the microbes floating around us right now. And understanding DNA has many known applications in forensics, medicine, or even agriculture. But here is the challenge. We still don't fully understand what it's saying. Right now, if we want to make sense out of a DNA, we don't actually read it, we search for it. Bioinformatics tools tries to compare DNA sequences against massive DNA databases and find and look for similarities to pre-existing DNA sequences. While it's very smart, it has major flaws. It's slow, it's computationally expensive, and it's uncertain. So if your sequence has above a certain number of threshold mutations or hasn't been explored before, you may not find a match. Or even worse, if you use with multiple tools, you may get multiple results. But what if we can learn the hidden patterns within the DNA? What if AI could read it like it reads human language? That's exactly what I'm doing. Instead of relying on massive databases, I'm trying to apply language models to learn the hidden patterns within the DNA. And like it learns the human language, words, finding the meaning behind them, and the recognitions, everything, we can apply to DNA sequences and apply it and get data from the DNA sequences in a much faster way. And it's not just about making research fast. It has life-saving applications, early cancer detection, precision medicine, even help us having a better understanding of the microbial communities and their dynamics and how they affect our health. And here's this interesting part. Our preliminary results outperform the existing state-of-the-art tools. With this, we can redefine how we analyze DNA and learn it fluently.
Sydney Borston.
When I ask you to picture someone who uses heroin, fentanyl, or painkillers, who do you see? You probably see someone who is older. This is not surprising, as recreational opioid use among older adults is rarely addressed in the media or prior academic research. However, older adults are highly impacted by the opioid crisis in the U.S. As you can see, the opioid overdose death rate among older adults has sharply increased over the past 2 decades. How can we address this alarming increase in overdose among older adults? One way is through treatment. There are 3 common types of treatment: detoxification, outpatient, and residential. Residential treatment can be an effective option since the patient can be outside of their usual social environment and focus on their treatment program. Treatment can lead to recovery and reduce overdose. How can we increase residential treatment engagement among older adults who use opioids? My dissertation research tried to help answer this question. We used epidemiologic methods to analyze existing data from the 2015 to 2019 treatment episodes data set, or TEDS. The TEDS contains information about admissions to and discharges from publicly funded substance use treatment facilities. First, we wanted to see if younger and older adults seeking residential treatment for opioid use had different characteristics that were important for treatment completion, using logistic regression models. We found that being married, a younger age at first use, Black race, and injection drug use were significantly associated with higher treatment completion among older adults. However, the opposite was found among younger adults. After establishing that older adults were a unique residential opioid use treatment population, we wanted to see if there were different patterns of substance use behavior using a latent class analysis. We found 4 groups of older adults with distinct substance use behaviors, including injection heroin use, alone or with other substances, and non-injection opioid use. After learning more information specifically about older adults in residential opioid treatment settings, we developed machine learning models to identify key predictors of treatment retention, including income, referral source, census region, and so we can use this research to inform and justify age-specific treatment programs to increase treatment engagement among older adults. Thank you.
Natalie Boyle.
Imagine watching a child throughout their first 2 years of life. They begin to talk, walk, and learn about the world around them. Then suddenly and without warning, they begin to regress. They lose all of the social, motor, and cognitive abilities they had gained. This is the heartbreaking reality of Rett syndrome, a severe neurodevelopmental disorder affecting 1 in 10,000 girls every year. But why does this happen? Well, in healthy brains, neurons communicate very efficiently. This is what allows us to move, think, and connect with others. But in Rett syndrome, neural pathways weaken, leading to the loss of motor function, social communication, and cognition. So the question remains, is there a way to strengthen these neural pathways to help children with Rett syndrome regain these lost abilities? The answer may be something as simple as movement. We often think of movement and learning as unrelated, but in reality, the two are deeply connected. For example, your walk into this very room engaged attention, decision-making, and spatial awareness. My lab has harnessed this concept of a movement-learning link to develop a unique 2-week motor training intervention for mice with Rett syndrome. My goal is to determine whether motor training can help strengthen neural circuits and restore cognition in Rett syndrome. But how do you measure something as tiny as a neuron? Well, to view neural activity, I use in vivo calcium imaging, a powerful technique using a miniaturized microscope inserted into the brain that lets me watch neurons light up and talk to each other in real time. At the same time, I test mice with the Barnes maze, a task that challenges their spatial learning. It's like being dropped into a new city with no GPS, and you have to find your way home using only landmarks. By comparing how neurons interact in motor-trained and untrained Rett mice, I can determine if motor training helps strengthen neural circuits that are required for learning. Presently, Rett syndrome has no cure. Current treatments manage symptoms, but they don't help children regain lost cognitive abilities. My research could help change that. So far, I have found that motor training helps improve spatial learning and reduce anxiety in our mouse model of Rett syndrome. This could lead to new non-drug therapies for Rett syndrome and similar neurodevelopmental disorders. Currently, Rett syndrome has no cure. The brain is still promising, but the right connections have been lost. And motor training may just be the key to rewiring the brain. Thank you.
I'm gonna give Dex Burns one last chance. Oh, he is here. Dex Burns.
So what happens to us when think tanks are not adaptable to change? Well, the short answer is we just won't hear from them. Organizations that are adaptable to change are going to be the only think tanks that we hear from.
Dex, could we pause for just a moment? We're having a technical difficulty with the screen. I'm so sorry to interrupt you.
We're seeing Morgan Byrne on the screen right now.
Here we go. Start again. Thank you so much.
Do y'all hear me?
Make sure you turn the mic on.
Okay. Okay. What happens when think tanks are not adaptable? We won't hear from them. Think tanks need to be adaptable in order for us to receive the knowledge and the things that they promote to us to influence our thinking and the thoughts of our policymakers. Adaptability is essentially a prerequisite for think tank leaders in today's age. Why? Because change is happening all the time. Although change happens in many institutions, in think tanks, it's essential for their survival and for them to complete their mission of influencing the way we think and the decision-making of our elected officials. So what happens when think tank leaders are not adaptable? Well, what happens is the think tanks they work in tend to close down. So organizations that promote thoughts that you care about, such as animal rights or LGBTQ issues, don't have the ears of their elected officials, or organizational inertia sets in, which basically means that the organizations will stall and they will fall behind their competitors. I'll give you an example. Last year, there was an AI boom, and many think tanks in Washington, D.C. refused to jump on it, but one think tank did, and not only did they incorporate artificial intelligence into their marketing and social media strategy, they expanded it all over the world, and they were able to push their Project 2025 initiative and the re-election of Donald Trump in the United States and around the world. So preliminary research shows that in order for organizations to be adaptable, they have to have leaders that are adaptive with and within the organizations, and they have to have the confidence to be adaptable. For this reason, I am studying the leadership self-efficacy and the adaptive leadership of think tank leaders in Washington, D.C. I'm conducting a quantitative correlational analysis to measure the strength of the relationship, and I will be using 2 validated Likert scales to measure leadership self-efficacy and adaptive leadership. I hope that the research that I'm conducting not only expands the existing literature on leadership self-efficacy and adaptability, but also encourages dialogue, enforces the need for change and adaptability, and organizational behavior changes in organizations that are so influential in our daily lives and to our elected officials. Thank you.
Andre Collado.
Today, the success of modern HIV treatment means that people with HIV are living longer and have a reduced risk of developing AIDS-associated illnesses. However, people with HIV are still prematurely developing comorbidities, some as early as 36 years of age. Chronic kidney disease is a progressive disease of aging and is often associated with additional comorbidities. Therefore, understanding how and why chronic kidney disease develops is more important than ever. We can identify kidney function using a measure called estimated glomerular filtration rates, or EGFR. This measure is commonly measured by HIV healthcare professionals and can be used to stage kidney function diseases. So, if we want to know what factors are most influential in developing kidney disease, first it would be useful to know what does kidney function look like among newly diagnosed people with HIV. To do this, we applied a group-based trajectory analysis on EGFRs, and what we discovered were 3 distinct trajectories of kidney function over time. Now, these trajectories were not dissimilar to trajectories that we would see in the general population. However, we did notice there were slightly elevated losses in kidney function among this group of people. So again, what impacts do we see on kidney function among people with HIV? This diagram illustrates some of the factors we think have the greatest impact among those people. Some are biological, we have behavioral, we have viral. But again, because people with HIV are living so much longer in this modern ART era, we're seeing a lot of comorbidities develop, such as hypertension, diabetes, or cardiovascular disease. And the presence of more or multiple of these comorbidities has great impacts on chronic kidney disease and potential adverse outcomes among people with HIV. So what we did was we looked at the results from our lowest trajectories of kidney function, and we applied a network-based analysis on the comorbidities among these participants to see which ones had the greatest influence. Comorbidities in the middle of the structures themselves had the greatest connections among additional comorbidities and might be important for potential interventions among people with HIV. Some conditions were consistent across various thresholds. For instance, hypertension was prominent of both moderate chronic kidney disease and severe kidney disease, while some conditions like anemia were only present among those with severe kidney disease. Perhaps they were indicative of severe ongoing other comorbidities. So again, network analysis allows us to shift our perspective from a disease-focused approach to a patient-centered one. We can see how chronic kidney disease itself is not an isolated comorbidity, but perhaps part of a larger network or web of multimorbidity. And this insight into chronic kidney disease and comorbidities in general helps us highlight participants with greater adverse outcomes and hopefully will influence how we address conditions in the future. Thank you.
Our apologies, there was a slight mix-up. That was Morgan. And now we have Andre.
Air and water. These are the 2 most abundant fluids on our planet, and luckily for us, because we need them to survive. If you didn't know, a gas is also considered a fluid, because its motion can be described by the same mathematical equations as a liquid, just with different material properties such as the density and viscosity. My research focuses on the interaction of these 2 fluids, namely in the events of strong turbulent mixing, which are relevant in a number of fields, including civil and naval engineering, designing firefighting equipment, and also in the chemical industry. One example where we can see this interaction is, for instance, in the wake of a ship, where the turbulence generated under the water can trap air bubbles from the surface, which diffract light beams and create this white cap phenomena we can see. Now, since 70% of the Earth's surface area is covered in water, that means there is a massive interface from which gas transfer can occur between the atmosphere and the ocean. This is controlled by a number of factors, including the underlying currents in the ocean, the breaking waves that happen at the surface, and also these trapped pockets of air. One way to study this would be to perform different lab experiments. However, there is a lot of practical issues when measuring the relevant variables as we approach the free surface in cases of strong turbulent mixing. And so, as an alternative, we can use computational fluid dynamics, which means solving the mathematical equations in a computer and simulating these flows. And this is a branch of computational physics that uses high-fidelity models that represent both fluids and give us ready access to all the data. This also has the advantage of producing some nice renderings, such as the one seen here from one of my simulations. Now, these simulations have a cost and require cutting-edge, high-performance computing platforms, using thousands of processors and can take weeks to complete. In my work, I use these computational experiments to complement those that can be done in a lab, while also exploiting machine learning and data-driven techniques to offer insights into difficult physical phenomena, such as how these air bubbles get trapped below the surface and broken apart into smaller bubbles underwater. And hopefully with this research, we can develop more theoretical models that can be used in the fields of ocean and environmental engineering. Thank you.
Pamela Chansky.
We rely on our immune systems to take charge in the presence of viral infections, things like COVID-19 or mono. T cells are a special type of immune cell that act as the body's highly trained assassins, seeking out and killing the infected cells. However, an estimated 6.6% of adults and 2.6% of children do not have functioning immune systems and are deemed immune compromised. What happens when they get viral infections? Left alone, they are unable to overcome their infection and would die from their disease, so intervention is required. One solution is virus-specific T cell therapy, or VSTs. VSTs are a subset of healthy human T cells that are known to recognize a particular virus and can kill the infected cells. These T cells are then given to the immune-compromised patient via infusion and will seek out and kill the infected cells just as they would in a person with a functioning immune system. However, studies show that between 65 and 90% of patients respond to this therapy, meaning we don't fully understand why some patients respond and others do not. Despite this uncertainty, VSTs are often less harmful than alternative solutions, like the standard of care antiviral medications, many of which are known to be associated with a variety of toxicities, even including liver or brain damage. This makes it challenging to determine whether we should give a virally infected immune-compromised patient a VST infusion or stick with the standard of care antiviral medications. Are VSTs likely to succeed in helping the patient overcome their infection? My thesis is focused on helping make this decision. I built a computational model using GenAI to predict the likelihood of response to a VST infusion based on known preclinical data collected from past clinical trials. These clinical trials are small, with fewer than 100 patients, making it challenging to predict VST success. Given that it would take many years to collect sufficient data, I decided to utilize a non-traditional method for modeling clinical data, one historically used to generate images, to synthesize realistic patient records. Patient records contain variables like which drugs the patient has received, what their reason for being immune compromised is, how compatible their blood type is with the VST product, and more. The model then combines these variables and understands their joint relationships with response, i.e., whether or not VSTs will likely help the patient in overcoming their infection. In training on the synthesized records, the subsequent model was able to predict if VSTs would help a patient with over 70% accuracy when tested on unseen, real patient data, a nearly 20% increase over simpler models. This implies that for future patients, we can predict if VSTs would be a good strategy and if the switch from antiviral medication should be made, increasing our confidence when it comes time to answering that challenging question and improving outcomes for future patients. Thank you.
Next should be Abdullah Clark. Next is not judge's brief deliberation, but it should be Abdullah Clark. There we go. Thank you.
Ideological polarization. It's a term thrown around a lot. It's actually a technical term, one defined in my research as opposing ideas or beliefs about reality. It represents a problem that strains our society and organizations and impacts organizations. Perhaps no place better to understand this problem and its related leader challenges is right here in the National Capital Region at federal agencies. Okay. Damn, sorry.
J.C. Dickerson is our last in this group.
It might have been clear from the ensemble cast of the Oppenheimer movie that it took hundreds of thousands of people to build the first nuclear weapon. Fortunately, since it was built, hundreds of thousands of people have also worked to anticipate and address any and all risks of nuclear weapons, including accident, theft, or their spread to countries around the world. These risks are included under the umbrella of nuclear nonproliferation. And it's tempting to describe nonproliferation policy using just the blue boxes on this diagram, inputs presented to decision makers who determine the policy. An example of that might be to describe what's happening in this photo as President Truman creating the Atomic Energy Commission to direct peaceful nuclear research once the world was no longer at war. But that would ignore all the people that spent months debating every word of that document before it hit his desk. So this simplistic view underappreciates all the other participants in the policy process other than the decision makers. This simplified process also doesn't fully explain how a variety of inputs, including often conflicting information, results in a policy decision. So if instead we use risk as the common factor that ties together all of these participants, we consider who is thinking about different kinds of risk, how their perspectives differ on how to process information, and how they can come together to reach those policy decisions. The white boxes on this diagram also represent the dozens of agencies and organizations that have existed within the federal bureaucracy since the 1940s that have in some way contributed to nuclear risk. My research is describing in more detail how these participants all engage together to describe the engagement of bureaucratic organizations with proliferation decisions, and in particular to describe why and how nonproliferation policy could change. I am analyzing both individual policies, including who's involved and how they conduct those, their various risk assessments, as well as laying out a high-level timeline for policy change in parallel with a timeline for bureaucratic change to compare and assess whether and how these changes might be systematically linked, and whether things like the creation or elimination of an agency ultimately affects how risk assessments are conducted, which is a trend that's emerging in my research. So it's clear to me that better understanding these mechanisms will help us better design policies and better target our organizations in the future. Thank you.
Let's give one final round of applause for our first set of competitors. That was amazing. I am so excited for the next two sets. Since I have a captive audience, while our judges get their 8 minutes to deliberate and take notes about our first set of competitors, I get to do a nice little commercial for some upcoming events we have. We are thrilled to announce Graduate and Professional Student Appreciation Week, which will take place the first week of April. So it'll be March 31st through April 5th. We will have a number of events. including a cocktail kickoff reception at the City View Room at the Elliott School on March 31st. We then will have on Tuesday a wonderful lunch for all of our graduate assistants. And then Wellness Wednesday, we'll be making essential oil room sprays and providing free chair massages, as well as some Zen coloring. And then on Thursday is my favorite event, Music in the Yard. We will have free pizza, live music, and yard games, and just a chance to hang out and enjoy the beautiful spring weather. That will take place in U Yard. And we will end the week with a happy hour at Hive Hotel. Along with all of those events, one every day of the week, we also will have additional activities such as a sticker competition. You can design a sticker that will then be distributed to grad students across campus. Really fun. The winner gets a $100 Visa gift card. And a raffle. You get a ticket for every event you attend, which should be very fun. And we're going to have a lovely basket full of GW branded merch from our wonderful campus store. Now we have about 6 minutes left for deliberation, so everyone please feel free to take a quick little break. We're going to put some music on and relax. Thank you. make their way back to our seats, please.
Is a disorder which causes people to experience debilitating seizures and can be divided into two categories, general and focal. In general epilepsy, seizures occur all over the brain, whereas in focal epilepsy, seizures occur in one area only. Focal epilepsy is proven to be resistant to treatment, and there is a great need for those that are experiencing the disorder for the development of a new treatment. Seizures in focal epilepsy are caused by an imbalance between excitatory and inhibitory cells in the brain. To conceptualize this idea, think of excitatory cells as telling the brain to go, and inhibitory cells as telling the brain to stop. When there is too much go and not enough stop, a seizure occurs. Now, if imbalance causes seizures, correcting the imbalance should fix them. And one way we could do this is by implanting inhibitory cells into the region where the seizures are occurring, essentially adding more stop. However, there is a problem with this method. Inhibitory cells will migrate when implanted into the brain. This is a unique problem for focal epilepsy because, for example, if seizures are occurring where the yellow lightning bolts are, when the inhibitory cells in red are implanted, they will migrate away and no longer be where they need to. I have come up with a solution to this problem, a medical device developed in our laboratory called the BioCage, which stops inhibitory cells from migrating. The BioCage is a microscopic cylinder covered in holes, and inhibitory cells can be packaged into the BioCage. Like the name BioCage would suggest, the holes are small enough to stop the cells from migrating away, but large enough to allow the inhibitory cells to reach out from inside the BioCage and send out their stop signal. To test the potential of the BioCage, I first generated an animal model for focal epilepsy and confirmed that it expresses the key hallmarks of the disorder. Next, using EEG, I determined that this model experiences a significant number of spontaneous seizures, something which had never been demonstrated before. And finally, I confirmed that it was possible to package inhibitory cells into the BioCage. The final step is to test the efficacy of the BioCage in reducing seizures. And based off the principles I've talked about today, I am confident that the BioCage will prove to be an effective treatment for focal epilepsy. Thank you.
Michael Guy.
So my dissertation, when boiled down to its most basic element, is about bringing an academic approach to public history. So why is this important? So a show of hands, how many people have been to a museum, a plantation museum, or other historic sites? And of you with your hands raised, how many of you went on a tour led by a docent? And how many of you questioned the information presented by the docent? I would assume not too many. For the general public, museums are one of the most trusted institutions for historical information. The Smithsonian Institute reported in 2024, 16.8 million people visited at least one of their museums. The American Alliance for Museums reported that in 2023, 28% of U.S. adult males reported going to at least one museum in the past year, and that's below the pre-pandemic levels of around 31%. On average, most history books written by academically trained historians are mostly sold to university libraries and not to individuals. The job of museum, specifically plantation museums, is to construct, convey the identity and cultural memory, both of the individual and the community. Museums tell us who, where, and what we should consider important. And these subjects are often filtered through the lens and beliefs of the staff, donors, and directors. Plantation museums play a key role in how the institution of slavery is remembered in American society. The way slavery is understood and digested is frequently more conceptual than tangible. The humanity of a slave can be overlooked and missed by those who have little reason to look for it. It is vital for plantation museums to bring across the humanity of the enslaved people in the same way they convey the humanity of the white slaveholding families. Museums provide us with a window into the past, and that window can be largely skewed both white and upper class. Museums are spaces in which knowledge and power are constructed, and the skewing of focus to predominantly white upper class subject base can affect collective memory and identity of the public. That is because museums just don't tell us about history. They hold a mirror up to contemporary society, allowing individuals to see themselves in the displays and exhibits. The stories told by museums through exhibits and material culture can go a long way in shaping public understanding. However, plantation museums have not always been bastions of unbiased historical thought. Plantation museums were co-opted early in the historical myth-making of the lost cause. And recasting the lost cause of the Civil War away from slavery to the struggle over self-identity and states' rights, plantations found themselves on the front lines of national attempts at reconciliation. My dissertation examines the tours at Hampton National Historic Site Plantation Museum in Baltimore County. Hampton was home to one of the most influential and little-known families in Maryland history, the Ridgeleys. My dissertation provides a window context to bringing a historical approach to the information provided by the docents. Thank you.
Ma'in Javed.
Did you know that according to the WHO, there's a 99% likelihood that you live in an area where the air pollution exceeds the WHO standards? This has implications for your health, your life expectancy, as well as your cognitive function. Most of this evidence is based on developed countries where data on air pollution is readily available. However, developing countries are more severely affected due to high levels of air pollution and because of limited ways to cope with air pollution. So in my dissertation, I select one of these countries, Pakistan, to causally estimate the impact of air pollution on basic learning outcomes for fifth graders. So these are variables like reading skills, math skills, and literacy. So because there's no data on air pollution monitoring in the country like other developing countries, I use satellite data for air pollution. And for learning outcomes, I use data from administrative public school records. So because a simple correlation between air pollution and education could be misleading due to unobserved factors, for example, local economic activity, which influence both variables, I exploit the widespread agricultural practice of crop burning in the country, which generates air pollution. So basically, I build a novel measure for air pollution by building a model about how winds transport pollutants from crop fires in areas where the schools are located. So this gives me a more credible estimate of the causal effect because wind patterns are likely to not be systematically correlated with other economic variables other than air pollution. More importantly, the model I built is replicable across developing countries because it's dependent on publicly available satellite data. So through this exercise, I find that air pollution has significant negative impacts on reading, literacy, and numeracy skills. And these impacts are larger than those in developed countries. I also find that teacher attendance and student attendance are important mechanisms that explain this. And air pollution also affects child health, which reduces their cognitive function. I also find that there are interesting gendered aspects to these effects. So girls are more severely impacted compared to boys. And in my setting, this is because of mobility-related reasons, because of poor visibility as a result of air pollution. So my findings show that air pollution affects even foundational learning skills in children in developing countries. And it also highlights the importance of conducting this research in different contexts, as the effects can vary depending on local conditions. Thank you.
Min Soo Kang.
Imagine walking in the woods on an autumn day and you hear the sound of rustling leaves under your shoes. Ask yourself, how do you feel? Some people report extreme negative emotional reactions to certain sounds. They feel uncontrollable rage, so anxious they can't even remain in the room. However, this is called misophonia. Miso means hatred in Greek. Misophonia literally means the hatred of sound. How many of you have this? Statistically, about 10 of you do. However, some people report the opposite reaction to certain sounds. You might feel an euphoric, physiological, tingling sensation in the back of your neck and spine. This is called ASMR, Autonomous Meridian Sensory Response. This was coined in 2010. There's not a lot of research on it, but we do know statistically in a room this size, again, about 10 of you have it. We also know that people who engage and seek out this sensation, they report, anecdotally at least, mental health benefits. And as a therapist, I'm interested in that. What makes some people have really adverse experiences and some people have really pleasurable experiences to sound? I want to know what makes this individual difference. According to polyvagal theory, which is a neurophysiological model of mental health, we can kind of figure out what's going on here. According to polyvagal theory, our past negative experiences, such as chronic stress or trauma, change our neurophysiological beings. It changes our vagus nerve, hence the name polyvagal theory. And because our autonomic nervous system is now heightened and looking out for what can harm us next, and looking out for us and trying to protect us, our senses are now heightened. Now, according to this theory, we can hypothesize that maybe people with ASMR and misophonia have a dysregulated nervous system. That's my research question is, do people with misophonia and ASMR report statistically significant higher exposure to adverse childhood experiences? And based on the theory and based on the literature, I would guess yes to both. This research has significant implications. Not only will we be able to know more about ASMR, the widespread internet phenomenon, by linking it to clinical variables and to better figure out its role in technology-based mental health aids, but it has great implications for the mental health field, for clinicians, practitioners, and educators to figure out, can ASMR be used as a screening tool, and for what populations can it be used? Thank you.
Sarah Club.
Picture this. You're playing your favorite sport. You're on a hike with your family, or you're cooking dinner in the kitchen. When you fall and scrape your knee or burn your hand at the stove, these are things that I know we've all experienced before. How does your body respond? How does your skin heal in just a matter of days? Or maybe you had a wound that didn't heal. Maybe you had a wound that scarred over. When these lines of communication are interrupted, it can lead to chronic, non-healing wounds that never seem to resolve. In normal, uninjured skin, the cells are all assigned to their appropriate layers, and when an injury occurs, there's an established series of events that happen where these different cell types are coming into the skin and communicating to each other, starting with inflammation. We can see inflammation with our eyes as redness and swelling of the skin. However, inflammation needs to subside in order for wound healing to be able to progress. There are different factors in these mechanisms that can be modified during this communication that lead to inflammation persisting for way too long. This leads to these chronic, non-healing wounds. We need a way to treat these wounds before they become chronic. My thesis project focuses on a specific receiver of these signals called GPR84, specifically in fat cells of the skin. It's been shown before that GPR84 is important for skin wound healing. It's also been shown that fat cells are important for skin wound healing. However, these were their individual importances. My thesis project combines these ideas, showing that GPR84 specifically on the fat cells is important for skin wound healing. We're able to study this by using genetically modified mice. I'm able to remove GPR84 only from the fat cells of the mice, and we show that after injury occurs, there's a significant delay in healing of these groups. The mice are physically not able to close the wounds on their back or form blood vessels within their wound beds, which are very much hallmarks of delayed wound healing. Future investigations involve looking at communication between fat cells and other cell types in the skin. By looking at different genes and proteins that are released by these different cells, we can better develop therapeutics to treat these chronic non-healing wounds. Chronic non-healing wounds account for $20 to $50 billion of healthcare costs every year in the United States alone, making it really important to study and develop these therapeutics. Patients can be treated with drugs to activate or inhibit these cell communications in order to have a better healing outcome. Let me leave you with one final thing to think about. The next time you fall down and scrape your knee or burn your hand at the stove, remember to thank your fat cells for helping you heal. Thank you.
Gray Maxon.
Don't forget about us. Don't throw us away. We want to still be active. Physical activity is essential for our health and well-being. While everyone benefits from it, it's one of the most important behaviors adults 65 and older can do to prevent chronic illnesses and to maintain independence and overall quality of life for longer. But only about 1 in 7 older adults in the US meet physical activity recommendations. And that underscores a real importance for us to find ways to help people be more physically active, even as they grow older. One solution, creating environments that support active transportation, which just means being able to walk, bike, or even use public transit to get around instead of driving. It's a way to make physical activity a part of our normal daily routines. I imagine a lot of us use active transportation a bit to get around this area, maybe for convenience or maybe because we're scared of parking tickets. But what's that experience like for older adults? What influences their behavior, meaning their decisions about whether or not to walk or bike to get around? Unfortunately, not a lot of research actually tells us. And in order for communities to make active transportation convenient and appealing to older adults, we need to hear from them. So for my dissertation, I interviewed older adults in DC while walking around their neighborhoods to document their thoughts and experiences. Here's some more of what they shared. First, older adults care about safety. Safety from crime, traffic, and dogs. Sidewalks and bike lanes need to be well maintained without cracks and tripping hazards. It's important to have a variety of destinations nearby, like grocery stores, restaurants, and parks. Public transit should be convenient and frequent. Seeing other people out and about helps them feel safer, and they value opportunities for social interaction. Hot or rainy weather can be a challenge, but street trees can provide shade and make it more comfortable. Trees and greenery also make it more aesthetically pleasing to walk and bike around. While some don't mind new construction and new development, they do want their neighborhoods to maintain their unique identity. Personal traits like physical limitations or values about health also influence their experiences and decisions. And lastly, but importantly, older adults want to be involved in their community's decisions and policies about how their neighborhoods are designed. I hope this research helps us to not forget about them and for communities to better understand what older adults want and need to feel safe and comfortable using active forms of transportation to get around, so that physical activity can just be a convenient part of daily life.
Uluwadame Lola Oki.
Imagine with me that it's the year 2050. I know it sounds very futuristic, very far off, but just think that's only 25 years from now. So imagine that it's the year 2050. We're living in the prime of technological and medical innovations. You know, if you can remember the Jetsons, flying aero cars and things like that. And all of a sudden, here comes news that half of these medical innovations are inaccurate for people with medium to dark skin tone. I know, very tragic, very tragic. So now we have increased deaths in this population because the medical innovations that were supposed to enhance their living are actually detrimental to them. And while that may not be a concern to some weirdos, it's 2050, right? So discrimination is so old school by then. In this future, medical device equity is the in thing. Unfortunately, if nothing is done now, medical device equity will not be our future. For instance, during COVID-19, increased deaths were reported in people with medium to dark skin tone because medical devices that use light in their working mechanisms were found to be inaccurate in this population, as you can see indicated to the left of my slide. In fact, in the device I currently work with, but the researchers have reported excluding medium to dark skin tone individuals in their work because they're concerned that the results might be inaccurate. So, to avoid this damper in our utopian The Jetsons fantasy, here come superhero phantoms to the rescue. Now, with these phantoms, researchers are able to isolate various characteristics of human tissue and replicate it in these phantoms. So this way, researchers and medical device manufacturers don't have to wait for human subjects to start testing the effectiveness of their device. In my research, I'm able to isolate light interactions of melanin. Melanin is what contributes to the pigment that we see in medium to dark skin tone individuals. And I can replicate and isolate and replicate these light interactions in my phantoms to create different levels of concentration, skin pigmentation. And I can then test how my device works across different levels of pigmentation. So far, I've been able to create different levels of this skin pigmentation, a protocol that's reliable for other researchers to also create the same thing and investigate medical devices that operate at light wavelengths beyond what the eyes can see, so at about 900 to 1350 nanometers. At this case, if they find that the device is not effective at a certain pigmentation level, they can address this issue at that stage long before that device ever gets to the market. So all in all, the long-term impact of this research is that in the year 2050, we all get to live our utopian dream in flying aero cars, not worried if the next doctor visit is going to lead to a misdiagnosis, which can lead to a death based on the color of your skin or that of your friend or loved one. Thank you.
Britta Ostermeyer.
Despite advancements that have been made for HIV therapy, people living with HIV are still at an increased risk for viral infections and cancers. And while people living with HIV are living longer lives with these therapies, we still need to understand what is happening so that they can live their best life possible. People living with HIV have weakened immune systems. And one of the reasons why their immune systems are weaker is due to the dysfunction of a type of immune cell called a natural killer cell, or an NK cell. NK cells play important roles in our immune system by killing viruses and cancers. However, when they are dysfunctional, they are not as good at killing. So they're not as good at protecting us from disease. So in my research for my thesis, I wanted to investigate how is this dysfunction happening, specifically in the context of HIV. And what we found is that platelets, which are a type of blood cell, interact with NK cells. And this interaction actually makes the NK cells better killers. However, in the context of HIV infection, we see more of these interactions happening. And while you might think that more interactions means better killing, what we actually think is happening is that the NK cells are becoming overstimulated and exhausted, and then they become dysfunctional. So if we can prevent that interaction from happening in people living with HIV, we can potentially prevent NK dysfunction. And how are we going to do that? What ways can we prevent this interaction from happening? Well, there's something called a platelet inhibitor. And platelet inhibitors are actually really common. One you may have heard of is called aspirin. And if scientists in the future study these platelet inhibitors, they can look at how they affect the immune system and potentially restore its function in people living with HIV. So, as you can see, there's still a lot of research to be done in order to fully understand all of the complications that arise during HIV infection, even while they're on therapy. So it's important that we continue to study this topic in order to help people living with HIV live their best life possible. Thank you.
Wonderful. Let's give a final round of applause for our second set. Our judges definitely have a challenge trying to pick a winner from all of these amazing presentations. We have one more set, but before we do that, we're going to give our judges some time to take notes and deliberate. We have about 8 minutes. And when we are done with this next set, then we will all vote for People's Choice, which should be very fun. I'll provide instructions then. So make sure you're taking notes about who you prefer and be ready to vote when you are prompted. Now please enjoy some music, take a little break, feel free to go get some water, and I'll call you guys back for our third and final set. back to their seat. Okay, everyone, and it is time to return for competitors. Thank you, everyone. After this, we'll vote for People's Choice. We'll present our awards, and then we have a wonderful reception that we hope you'll join us for. And now for our first competitor, let's see, where did I have it? OGPA.
Okay, I assume like everyone likes gambling, right? But no one likes losing money. What if I'm telling you, all of us, we actually are sitting by a huge gambling table? Do you believe that? Take a look at your electricity bill that you pay every month. The amount you pay actually changes a lot, even though your energy use behavior does not change in that way. Why is that? Because our energy market is dynamic. You probably will think the only house behind this game is our utility. But now I'm telling you, the utility is more anxious than anyone else. Why? On the one hand, they are spending like millions of dollars expanding their renewable energy for decarbonization purpose. On the other hand, they have witnessed an increasing number of prosumers in the market. What are prosumers? Producers and consumers. If you have a solar shingling or solar panel at your house, you can call yourself a prosumer because you can supply energy to yourself. Well, utilities hate that because they cannot make money from you. And in a worst case, you can sell your energy back to the grid to make money out of utilities' pockets. You probably will think like one prosumer or several prosumers cannot shake the monopoly position of utilities in the market. Yeah, true, because also we have the energy policies that are limiting the total number of prosumers in the market. However, those policies change every year, and they're becoming more and more open to having more prosumers in the market. Well, think about one scenario. If 60% of city energy users are prosumers, so in that case, the utilities will be forced to change their market mechanism. In this case, who is the house? It is an interesting research question. And in my research, I used my systems modeling tools to capture the interplay between the prosumers and the system utilities. And I found out an interesting and a very critical point of expanding the renewable energy. So below this critical point, the utilities will prefer to have use a real-time market to maintain their profitability. That's what we experience now. But beyond that point, the utilities will fix the market because they assume they have enough renewable energy based on the current situations. However, there are two fun facts. First, we haven't reached to this point yet, which means we are still in this game. Second, even the utilities, they cannot predict how many prosumers will be allowed enter the market because of the uncertainty for the future energy policies. So while we're here, do you know how to put your bidding in the game? Thank you.
Hasera Ratnasikara.
Hi
everyone. Have you guys heard about the recent TikTok ban? So the US government wanted to ban TikTok, citing its national security concerns. However, the TikTok users claim that this ban would hinder their right to freedom of speech, and also this would close avenues to express their creativity, and for some of them, it might disrupt their business opportunities. So this TikTok ban is a prime example for a digital barrier. So in my research, I am studying a similar case from India to estimate the impact of such digital barriers to understand the impact on consumers. So I want to study and learn the consumer side of the story. So in India, now if you look at my slide, you can see all those apps are right now banned in India. So this is a screenshot of my phone. Not only that, there are more than 300 other apps are banned in India as a retaliation to a geopolitical conflict between India and China. So using this case, I conducted an online consumer survey to ask questions about 3 main areas. So first, how has this ban impacted the e-commerce market characteristics, social media app use, and also electronic payment app use in India? Second, I asked consumers what is their preference for ownership of those apps. So do they prefer an Indian ownership, or do they prefer Chinese ownership? If not, do they prefer Chinese ownership with resolving all these like national security concerns? And lastly, I designed an experiment, a very interesting one, to see whether information can change consumers' policy preferences. So what I have learned so far is that, yes, consumers have been impacted from this ban because market prices have increased, and also they saw a decline in product quality and product variety in the e-commerce market. Now, when it comes to app ownership, they preferred Indian ownership the most. But their second best option was Chinese ownership, however, after resolving the national security concerns. And lastly, but most importantly, in my field experiment, I learned that giving information to people can change their policy preferences. So when they hear good things about open digital policies, they will choose more open digital policies than restrictive ones. So I believe the findings of my study will provide valuable insights to policymakers and also to public to choose better policy decisions, like balancing options that we have. Thank you.
Awanti Shastri.
You probably don't like getting outside the house when it's too hot or too cold. Well, animals face the same problem. Insects are particularly vulnerable because they are ectotherms. The outside temperature directly affects their body function. I study the effect of temperature on the behavior of ants. And I study ants, well, not just because they're cool, but because there are more than 15,000 species of ants living in diverse habitat across the world, performing important ecological roles. I study 2 species in Shenandoah National Park that are important seed dispersers. As we move higher up the mountain, there is a switch from an ant that likes it warm to an ant that likes it cold. I monitor, but because of climate change, the low elevation species is slowly moving into higher elevations. So I monitor colonies at different elevations, and I found that this low elevation species is more active, which makes them better suited to move into the high elevation areas. I then brought colonies into the lab and exposed them to different temperatures. Surprisingly, I found that at a higher temperature, both the species were less active, so they were less efficient at finding food, and they produced fewer new queens and males. Now, these ants nest in the soil, so if it gets too hot, they can just go deeper under the ground. But what if there are ants living on trees in tropical forests? They are exposed to the heat all the times with little to no escape. I also study the acacia ants in Panama. The entire colony lives on the plant, and the plant provides them with food and shelter. In return, the ants aggressively defend the plant from anything that's munching on it. So they're completely dependent on each other. If the ant colony dies, the plant dies, and vice versa. So to study the effect of temperature on these ants, I built tiny greenhouses and increased the temperature around the plant. I found that the ants in these enclosures were less likely to defend the plant, and they were already experiencing temperatures close to their tolerance limits. This could potentially disrupt the mutual relationship between the ant and the plants. A lot of people don't really like ants, but they are excellent organisms to answer these broad ecological questions. My thesis highlights that effects on one species can have cascading effects throughout the ecosystem, and that it is important to study the behavior of insects to better understand how they will be impacted and to inform conservation practices. So the next time you step outside on a really hot day, try to observe what the ants are doing. Thank you.
Christine St. Pierre.
There's a motivational quote in the nutrition world that goes something like this: every time you eat or drink, you're either fighting disease or feeding it. It's perhaps a bit intense if we take it literally, but it makes me think about our repeated food behaviors that start in childhood and become food habits and affect not just disease, but health outcomes throughout the lifespan. So what drives these food behaviors? And if food education programs are aiming to help children develop healthy food behaviors that persist for the long term, what evidence can we collect now to capture their success? These are the big questions that led to my dissertation research on food literacy in children. Food literacy is a concept that captures the major interconnected factors driving food behaviors. People with high food literacy are said to be able to make food decisions that support both their personal health and a sustainable food system. And this leads to my first research question. What is food literacy in children who have limited agency over their food choices and who are only beginning to develop their critical thinking skills? After an in-depth review of the existing evidence in the field, I found 4 consistent dimensions of food literacy in children. The food systems and nutrition knowledge, valuing shared food experiences, confidence in their everyday food skills, and purposeful engagement with food, which includes engaging with their senses and being willing to try new foods. My second question then is, how do we measure these dimensions in an age-appropriate way in upper elementary students who are just starting to be reliable self-reporters? To find out, I developed questions for each dimension and had them reviewed by a panel of expert practitioners and researchers from across the country. I made revisions based on their feedback, and I'm now testing the questions with small groups of students at 5 elementary schools to make sure that these 4th and 5th graders are actually thinking about what I'm trying to ask about when they read the questions. Later this spring, approximately 800 students at 11 different schools will complete the food literacy questionnaire so that I can analyze how well it really measures food literacy. My third question tests my hypothesis that food literacy is related to food behaviors. Those same 800 students who represent large cities and small towns and many different cultural and socioeconomic backgrounds will also answer questions about their food behaviors, and I'll examine whether higher food literacy is truly associated with healthier food behavior. My research will help guide measurement in the future as we seek to understand these complex relationships. Can increasing children's food literacy actually improve their food behaviors? And can those behaviors in turn substantially impact health at different stages of life, from promoting learning and play and social connection in childhood to an active lifestyle, reduced chronic disease, and a higher quality of life in older adulthood? Thank you.
Ben Telly.
Good afternoon. Imagine an art classroom where students are learning about difficult histories and topics: racial injustice, school gun violence, LGBTQ+ issues. These are problems that adolescents need to grapple with in today's classrooms, but it's just not happening enough. In my dissertation, I'm concerned with the concept that's posed by psychoanalyst and curriculum studies scholar Deborah Britzman. It's called difficult knowledge. And this is knowledge that encompasses a lot of strong emotions and discomforting feelings about socially traumatic topics that teachers and students engage with in education. So for the last 15 years as a full-time art educator at a Jewish day school in Maryland, I came up with a curriculum called Difficult Histories and Events in Our Lives, where I challenge my students to study and take up topics that are on their minds that include difficult knowledge and engage them through a rigorous process of art making and self-reflection. So in my study are 3 former students who've graduated from my school and who've deeply become immersed in this curriculum. And so through several in-depth interviews and a focus group, I'm trying to learn more about their memories, their inner experiences, and I would say how their learning has been impacted by this curriculum as undergrads at different institutions. So the slide behind me here is a progression of artwork from a real research participant who I'm calling Sibley. I'm using a pseudonym. But these are the artworks she talked about in our interviews. They're very powerful. So to the left, we have a piece that she did in 2018 in 9th grade called Welcome to Paradise. And this piece was a response to the California wildfires of 2018, gave her a chance to kind of empathize with California residents and also learn more about her feelings as she was processing them when she was learning about this in the news and media. The middle piece is called Asteria, which was done in 2020 during the COVID-19 pandemic. And this was a piece she created of a digital cat character to kind of combat feelings of isolation in distance learning. And the final piece to the right, she wanted to do something a little bigger for the school community when she came back from distance learning. This is an LGBTQ+ support mural for Jewish youth at our school, allowed her to also examine her own gender identity. So, you know, why are these projects important? Why does this research matter? Art is just not some elective that students take. It's a vitally important class and subject in our schools that students can think critically and deeply, and also proving from my coding analysis on the data that these students learned about emotional resiliency, learned more about topics in their social world, and more about their identities. Thank you.
Jiaxing Yang.
Oh, hello everyone. Follow the water is a core scientific strategy used by NASA in exploring solar system and beyond, particularly in search for potential life. While shallow water ice, buried from a few centimeters to kilometers, is understood to be widespread on the Martian surfaces. 30-meter wavelength of a radio frequency wave is believed to have the capacity to penetrate the Martian surface and detect the buried features within the 10-meter depth. This wavelength can achieve a very good trade-off between the penetration depth and the backscatter intensity. To help evaluate the performance of the mission's instrument in down-looking mode, we have developed a 3-layer backscattering model. I'm sorry. 3-layer backscattering model. In our model, the incident wave is transmitted as a compressed pulse straight down to the surface. And it hit the upper surface and the lower surface and scattered back to the receiver. The backscatter wave can be divided as a coherent wave and incoherent wave. The coherent wave is a reflection from the mean plane surface, while the incoherent wave is generated by the roughness, the concave and the convex of the surfaces. In our model, some features of the instrument is considered, including the pulse compression. 1 meter pulse length can provide roughly 1 meter resolution in vertical dimension. And the beam pattern, which means the transmitted wave intensity is a variable across the illuminated area. The SAR processing, which is a beam sharpening technique, is applied by observing an area from many different angles to increase the transverse resolution. And by the sub-processing and pulse compression, we can derive the three-dimension position of an ice layer. The model is applied to different scenarios. The scenarios have parameters of roughness scale, attenuation inside the regulus, and the reflectivity between layer surfaces. And in our result, the depth can be revealed by the time difference from one pulse and another. For example, in the first picture, the detection depth is 2 meters, while in this case, when the roughness scale is not so big, when the attenuation is low, the transmitted pulse can reach a depth of 15 meters. Or when the surface is very rough, or the attenuation is very high, the instrument cannot detect anything. So with this result, can help us design the radar instrument better and get us closer to the Mars. Thank you.
And a round of applause for all of our competitors today. I don't know about you guys, but I am incredibly impressed by the amount of incredible scholarship and academic work that I have seen. I know that you guys have put hours and hours of work into this dissertation, and we only got to see a little itty-bitty part of it. But you should be very, very proud of yourselves. I know GW is very proud of you. Your advisors are proud of you. We are proud of you. That was absolutely incredible. Thank you. Thank you for taking the time to be with us today. One more round of applause for you guys. Now, for the fun part, judges, you are dismissed to go deliberate. Thank you. While they are off doing their thing, we get to do a little voting here. So the judges are off for final scoring, and we get to vote for People's Choice Award. So People's Choice Award is, as it says, it's a $500 cash prize, and it is the individual who the audience, those here and our virtual friends, choose to be the person they liked the most, whose presentation they liked, found most interesting. The voting process is pretty simple. In a few minutes, we're gonna put a QR code on the screen. You can use your cell phone to scan that QR code, and it will open up a quiz. It will show you the names and the presentations of each of our competitors in the order they presented. You may select one, and you may only vote once. We also ask that you do not share the QR code with anyone who was not present, and only people who watched the entirety of the presentations actually vote. Voting will be open for 5 minutes. So if everyone wants to pull their phones out and get ready, set, throw the QR code up, please. Thank you, everyone. head back to your seats. It's the moment we've all been waiting for. Our judges have finished deliberating. They did an amazing job, you guys. They had like a lot of stacks of paperworks and notes. They did amazing. We're going to announce the winners in this following order. We will start with third, then we will go to second, then first, and then we will announce the People's Choice Award winner. If you are a winner and your name is called, please step up to the podium. We will present your award, pause for a photo, and then just step to the side but remain up here because we'd like to get some group photos. And now we'll have Autumn come present the awards. And Suresh.
Okay, here we go. In third place, we have Natalie Boyle.
We lied, sit back down.
I'm so sorry. Was handed the wrong award. Okay. Okay. In third place, we have Alex Edwards. If we can open it.
Step right over there. Yeah.
Okay. In second place, we have Sarah Klepp. In first place, we have Natalie Boyle. Okay, and for the last but not least People's Choice Award, we have Natalie Boyle.
Group photo.
Okay, so now that we've had individual photos taken, we would love to have a group photo with all three of our winners. If you could come to the center of the room, and Suresh, if you would like to join them. Okay, first a photo with you three, and then we'll have Suresh.
Yeah, open. Open.
You should be in the middle. Just crush it.
Let's go.
Oh, yeah.
Yes, now you may sit down. One more round of applause for our winners.
Okay, so we are nearing the end here, and I want to thank everyone for your patience, your attention, your participation. We'll let you get up from your seats very soon, but before we do that, a couple of final announcements. You've been an excellent audience, and because of that, we would like to remind you that we're hosting a special event in a reception to celebrate our winners and to commingle and socialize, get to know each other a little bit better. So that will be in room 301 for champagne and dessert. And before we conclude, I'd like to express a big thank you to everyone who participated and worked together to make this event special. Thank you to our judges for your diligence. Thank you to our amazing presenters for your fascinating talks today. I feel thoroughly inspired and educated. Thank you to our volunteers who helped organize the event and who made sure everything ran smoothly today. Thank you to our team at OGPA for everything that you did to help make sure that this was possible. And thank you to our Vice Provost, Suresh Subramaniam, for making sure that our university can put on this event every year. We are working hard to make it a better event, an event that draws more attention, a better attended event every year. So please spread the word, make sure to keep it on your radar for next year. And I think with that, I will hand it over to Suresh Subramaniam.
I hope you enjoyed this event as much as I did. I was sitting there and looking at each of the presentations and thinking, wow, that's got to be the winner. And the next one, well, no, this is better than the previous one. I can imagine the difficult time the judges must have had in picking the final set of winners, right? So congratulations to all of the winners and congratulations to all of the participants. Presenting your research in 3 minutes is actually a lot more challenging than presenting it in 30 minutes or whatever that you do at your conferences. You probably have realized that by now. And this is a really important skill, especially in this age of such low attention. Everybody is multitasking, looking at TikTok or whatnot, and you have to grab their attention in a minute or less. And you did a great job today. So congratulations again to all the participants and all of the winners. And I look forward to seeing some of you next year. Those that did not win are eligible to participate again the next year. And I hope to see you all apply to come and present next year. So you become better at it if you do it many times, right? You know that by now. So I'm going to welcome you all to join us at the reception. But before I do that, I want to give a big shout out to all of the OGPA team and all of the volunteers, but in particular to Autumn and Hillary, who have worked on this for several weeks and made sure that everything goes smoothly. So give them a big hand, please. So thank you again for coming, and hopefully we'll see you again next year. So please join us for the reception in room 301, sorry.
Okay.